Welcome to the UFC 317 prop drop, where we briefly go over every single matchup on the card and I highlight my favorite props for every single matchup and then end the segment off with my top 3 prop spots as well as a long shot for you guys. So let's get right into the business here. First matchup up in the heavyweight division, we got Diniz going up against UFC newcomer Hines. I think Diniz is the superior striker, and that will likely line up a knockout for him in the second or third round, but you cannot overlook the chances that Hines has in this matchup. Not to mention, you got some pretty juicy odds here if he is to win this fight in a way that he normally does. Hines to win by submission currently sits at plus 850, as he has shown some solid dominance from that top position and seeking out different types of submissions to get his wins throughout his career. But he could also grind this fight out and keep Diniz on his back and win this fight on the scorecards, which he can currently get at plus 110. But I think it's going to be the Brazilian that ends up finding the knockout. Next up, we got Jacoby Smith going up against Nico Price. I've been really flip-flopping in terms of the method of victory here for Smith over the last few days. A lot of people leaning knockout round 1, which is currently sitting at minus 105. But I've also thrown out, if he can't get that first round knockout, this likely looks like him just grinding Price up against the cage, landing a few takedowns and getting some good shots off from that top position, but winning this fight on the scorecards, which you can currently get at plus 750. So I'd consider either of those two. On the flip side, for the hedge spot, Price by decision plus 2,100, Price by knockout plus 2,300. But let's be honest, you can probably get priced money line at plus 1,000 at this point, and that might be the best hedge opportunity anyway. So no need to get greedy with it in terms of a prop here for the Price side. All right. Next up, a very violent matchup here between Terrence McKinney and Vyacheslav Borshchev. I'm expecting this fight to go under 1.5 rounds, and you can currently get at that at minus 215. It's been taking some chalk and some steam over the last couple of days, and for good reason. McKinney does not get out of the first round that often, nor does he ever get out of that under 1.5 round mark. All 10 of his UFC fights have finished under 1.5 rounds, 8 of those fights finishing in the first round, and I believe it's 22 of his 23 pro fights that have finished under 1.5 rounds as well. I expect that to continue this weekend. If you want to try to trim that a little bit more, you can get fight does not start round 2 at minus 130, which is not a bad line either. Now, I'm going to throw a couple of different spots at you in terms of method of victory props here that I feel pretty intrigued by. Borshchev round 1 KO plus 500. Borshchev round 1 sub plus 5,000. Now, when McKinney gasses, he gasses bad. And I wouldn't be surprised if Borshchev, attacks the neck of McKinney. If McKinney starts to desperation grapple here, and just given the exhaustion of McKinney, maybe he just ends up tapping due to that exhaustion. But I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Borshchev try to lock up a choke of some sort if he sees the opportunity there. But I think it's more so a knockout that ends up coming through for him. Round 1 knockout plus 500, round 2 knockout plus 800, and then again, round 1 or round 2 sub for Borshchev would be plus 5,000. On the flip side, Terrence McKinney, round 1 sub plus 480. That's probably his best way to win this matchup. He might get the club and sub. He might look for the TKO, but I think he's going to be looking to get Borshchev to the ground immediately, and I think if he wins, it'll likely come by rear naked choke, but fight does not start round 2 is probably my favorite prop for that matchup. All right, next up, we got women's flyweights throwing down here as we have Tracy Cortez going up against Viviane Araujo. No need to get too deep into this one. These women do not finish. They are decision machines. Cortez to win by decision minus 190 is a spot that I'm leaning on. Araujo to win by decision currently sits at plus 350. All right, next up, another banger matchup here between Amil and Jose Delgado. I think Amil can set a grappling pace that Delgado is not comfortable with, and I think he'll stay on that type of pressure that entire 15 minutes, and I think if Amil wins, it probably comes on the scorecards, which he can currently get at plus 500. On the flip side, Delgado could expose some of the striking defense issues in Amil's game, and he could come through with a knockout, which currently sits at plus 300, but I think Amil is going to make it very difficult for him as he keeps him on his back foot, push him up against the cage, lands a few takedowns, maybe a couple mat returns as well, but I think it's ultimately going to be Amil on the scorecards at plus 500. Next up, prelim headliner here between Gregory Rodrigues and Jack Hermansson. I think Rodrigues will be able to bounce back into the win column here after his blunder against Jared Cannonier a couple months back. I think a lot of this fight looks like Rodrigues walking Hermansson down, landing big power shots, maybe landing a few takedowns as well. I think he wins this fight on the scorecards, which you can currently get at plus 230. If he does land a big shot on Hermansson, it's possible he can get him out of there by knockout as well, which you can currently get at plus 200. And if Hermansson wins, maybe it's him with, on his bicycle, just like he was against Joe Pyfer and Chris Curtis. And maybe he wins this fight on the scorecards, which you can currently get at plus 290. But I think it's going to be Rodrigues who wins by judge's decision. All right. Opening bout on the pay-per-view main card now. Fun bantamweight scrap here between Philippe Lima and Peyton Talbott. I think this is a bad stylistic matchup for Talbott, as Lima is can be a very competitive striker here against Talbott's wizardry with his striking. But I think Lima will mix that striking with some grappling, high pressure, high pace, keep Talbott on his back foot, land a few takedowns, grind this fight out, win it on the scorecards, which you can currently get at plus 120. If Lima is crafty enough on the ground, maybe he can work to a submission, which you can get at plus 600, but I think it's ultimately going to be the decision that ends up happening here. For the flip side, for Talbott, if he wins, I think it more than looks like him catching Lima. I think he lands that big shot and puts him away, which you can currently get Talbott by knockout at plus 390. But I think if this fight hits the scorecards, it's more than likely that Lima is the one who had done enough to get his hand raised. All right. Fun lightweight matchup here between Beneil Dariush and Renato Moicano. They were originally scheduled to fight back in January before Moicano got the call up to fight Islam Makhachev after Arman Sarukian pulled out. And I think, I'm glad we're finally getting this matchup again, as both guys are very violent and will often provide finishes. And the under 2.5 currently sits at minus 115 for this fight. I think it's going to be Dariush. I know he's had some durability issues, and you can get Moicano to win by knockout at plus 500, but I don't think Moicano is a big knockout threat, and I think it will be Dariush who will be able to dictate the pace of this matchup, land some big shots of his own, and I think he could win either by knockout or submission. You can get Dariush to win inside the distance at plus 280, and the one that stands out to me the most, because people forget how much of a BJJ specialist Dariush is, you can get Dariush to win by submission at plus 900. That's absolutely possible as well. So under 2.5, probably the best way to go about it, but I do like Dariush inside the distance at plus 280 as well. All right, number one contender matchup here in the flyweight division, as we have Brandon Royval looking to get back to another title shot, going up against the streaking 23-year-old Joshua Van, who's looking to snatch that momentum from Royval and get an opportunity of his own to fight for UFC gold. And I think he's capable of doing that. I think he's the better striker. I think he's a guy that can put that pressure on Royval, make Royval pay for some of the mistakes that he makes in the striking realm, and I think he can shut down the grappling game of Royval as well. I think Van ultimately pulls away with this matchup in the second and third rounds, landing his usual combination striking style while stalking Royval down the cage, and you can get Van to win by decision at plus 165. If he does happen to clip Royval and put him away, which is a very tough task in the first place, but you can get Van to win by knockout at plus 440. On the flip side, for Royval, if he wins, probably some control time, maybe a lot of output from distance if Van's unable to catch him or cut him off. Royval to win by decision is plus 230, and Royval to win by submission, we know he is very aggressive with that BJJ approach. If he can find his way to a spot where he can sink in a submission, you can cash that at plus 750. But I think it's going to be the Burmese fighter here in Van who ends up getting his hand raised on the scorecards. All right. The first of two title fights now. In the first one here in the flyweight division, we got Alexandre Pantoja going up against Kai Kara-France. Clearly a grappler versus striker matchup here, but I believe the grappling of Pantoja will end up being too much for Kara-France, which should lead to Pantoja getting those spots that he needs. I think he ends up winning this fight by submission, which you can currently get at plus 220, but you can also get Pantoja to win by decision at plus 210 if he just ends up going with control over submissions or position over submission. On the flip side for Kara-France, I think if he wins, it's going to have to be by knockout, which you can currently get at plus 500. but I think that Pantoja will keep him away from that power, smother him in the grappling room, and eventually find that submission. All right, main event time now in the lightweight division for the vacant lightweight title. We got former featherweight champion Ilia Topuria taking on former lightweight champion Charles do Bronx Oliveira. Very fun fight here between two very violent fighters. Now, a lot of people are thinking that it's going to be Topuria by knockout, which is why it's sitting at minus 165. I could see a potential of Topuria trying to make a case, trying to make a statement, either looking to club and sub Charles Oliveira or just straight up try to submit him. He is a high-level BJJ black belt, but we haven't seen much of it because he's going out there and just starching dudes with his hands. But 7 of his first 8 wins came by submission, and that's a style he used to lean on a lot before coming to the UFC, and that's where he started knocking dudes' heads off. So I understand why he's refraining from the submission game, but I think it's a possibility. You know, if you guys remember John Jones during his run, he made it a point to go into the strength of his opponent to showcase how dominant he could be and try to finish them that way. And I could see that type of aura from Topuria trying to replicate that. And plus 600 is not a bad line either. I honestly think it's going to be by knockout, but I think that submission prop is definitely worth a mention for that reasoning alone. On the flip side for Oliveira by submission plus 700, Oliveira by knockout plus 1,000. Obviously, everybody's going to be pointing at that Jai Herbert spot where he almost finished Topuria with a head kick. I think it was a head kick. But either way, maybe Topuria can be clipped. But at 155 pounds, I'd be surprised if he does have any durability issues here. And I think it's going to end up being Topuria who ends up winning this fight by knockout. All right. Let's get to the top 3 spots here, top 3 prop bets. Just quickly talking about last week's, we went 1 and 2, but thankfully that one that we did hit was Rafael Fiziev to win by decision, which was at plus 310, so we were able to profit there. And then the long shot does not come through. There was a small bite in that third round as Grad was able to get the back of Mohamed Naimov, but was unable to finish the submission there. We had Grad by submission plus 1,400, Grad by round 3 submission plus 5,000. It would have been nice to cash that plus 5,000, but it was not meant to be. All right, let's talk about the top 3 for UFC 317. The first of which is going to be the Vyacheslav Borshchev and Terrence McKinney fight to not start round 2, which you can get at minus 130. I'm expecting chaos from jump. The second spot is going to be the Beneil Dariush and Renato Moicano under 2.5 rounds at minus 115. I'm expecting violence from either guy. I think it's going to be Dariush who ends up getting the finish, but should be violent for as long as it lasts. And then the third one is going to be Alexandre Pantoja by submission at plus 220. I think he gets the back of Car France within 2 rounds. I think he finds that submission and he makes it look easy as well. And the long shot. We're going to go Beneil Dariush by submission plus 900. I think he breaks Moicano down and either gets that club and sub or just gets this to the ground and finds a spot to get that submission off. And at plus 900, I'm more than willing to consider as a long shot here and pull the trigger. There you guys go. Prop drop for UFC 317. That is a wrap on the content for this week. Reminder, there is no UFC next week, so it is an off week in terms of content, but I will be dropping a breakdown for PFL Europe, so stay tuned for that on the YouTube channel. There's also PFL MENA going down next weekend, and I'll be doing written breakdowns for that on the Lock of the Night Patreon page, so make sure you guys stay tuned for that, and I'll probably get a bit of a head start on the next UFC card as well, so you guys can check that out on the Lock of the Night Patreon page as well. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next week for the PFL Europe breakdown. See you guys then. Peace.